Iranians?
Hey, what's up, everyone? Sorry I'm a little disheveled here. That's kind of my motif, though. I'm always a little disheveled. Welcome to Normal America Show. I'm your congested host, robnoerr. I hope all of you are doing fantastic today. I am. I'm very busy. So just to give people a little insight into my career, I use the term loosely. I think I could have my job without a GED. Doing home health, I do home health care with people with disabilities, and because the state funds part of it, they have a licensing board that checks in once a year, or around about once a year, and so licensing's coming up for us here, and it makes my job quite busy. My day-to-day work, working with my clients and everything, is fine, but there's a lot of paperwork, making sure that everything's on the up and up and things like that. And of course I got like 5 bosses, so I get 50 calls a day. So I was a little disheveled, and I tried to call the wife, and she didn't answer. So then I started streaming, and then she called back right as I started the stream. So that's what I was doing. My son Hank took the phone from her and ran around the house. He was FaceTiming me, showing me his dinosaurs and stuff. So that's where I was. So I've been so busy today, I haven't even checked out Twitter or the news. So I've no idea what is broken today. I was just perusing Twitter here now. Anything that we should be talking about? The last thing I read was that apparently Hamas said that they'll execute hostages live on television, or something to that effect. I'm dead news. So, no way, what channel is that? I don't know. I don't think that's on basic cable. So we'll talk about sort of the war and stuff like that. I'll just kind of riff. Anything anyone wants to talk about in the chat, just let me know. So I didn't really have an agenda except sort of to talk about the war. I thought I would start with this. I mentioned this the other day. I did a Twitch-only stream, and we talked a little about the war. So there's a couple things that I'll sort of repeat from there, but I wanted to dive in on some other things. First, I say this all the time, is someone who... I consider myself a populist first and foremost, but I consider myself conservative or right-wing. Our greatest strength is our greatest weakness, and that is that we're willing to hear the other side. And this has been for years and years and years. If you follow Jonathan Haidt at Heterodox Academy, I've talked about these studies that he did before, where basically he would hand out surveys to people. He would ask college students, he would ask if they were left or right-leaning or Republican, Democrat. I don't know exact wording. And then he would give them these surveys, and the surveys would have all of these sort of value questions. It would say things like, you're walking down the street and you see a homeless man. What do you do? Do you give him money? Do you help him train for a job, etc., etc., etc.? Do you kick him in the ribs? You know, something like that. And then he would have these people take the survey, and then he would hand the survey back to them and say, okay, now pretend you're the other side. So if you're a left-winger, pretend you're a right-winger. And now fill out the survey as if you were a right-winger. Or if you're a right-winger, pretend you're a left-winger and fill out the survey. And what he found was that overwhelmingly, people on the right were able to pretty accurately determine what the left would say. But the left almost always chose the most evil thing for the right. So maybe a right-winger would have said, like, help the homeless person with a job resume. But the left-wingers thought the right-wingers would be like, kick them in the ribs and tell them to get a job. In other words, the left thinks the right is evil, and the right thinks the left is wrong. And this is something that people have talked about for years and years and years. As such, I've articulated many, many times on this show, I'm willing to debate people, I'm willing to hear out people on the other side, even when they're clearly bad faith. In fact, some of the people I enjoy debating the most are bad faith. Pisco, for example, is bad faith. Because Pisco's not an idiot, but he'll force himself to say things like, Martha's Vineyard doesn't have enough resources to take care of 50 illegal immigrants for more than 48 hours. Jamal Bowman, although it appears unlikely, it's more likely he pulled a fire alarm trying to open a door than he wanted the alarm to go off to cause a distraction. That's bad faith, or that's so much cognitive dissonance that it might as well be bad faith. But I, myself, try to hear out the other side and respond to them. I did a show last week that said, now I think the results... I'll still do that if I feel like it. Other times I'll just laugh at them, because that's what they deserve. You should laugh at people like that. I also said this, that when it comes to people that I think that are engaging in good faith, I will certainly engage in good faith, and I'll give them direct answers as possible when they ask me questions. However, I'm not... the people that have engaged in sort of partisanship, bad faith bullshit, they're not entitled to that from me. So I don't owe them anything. So it's in that vein I want to talk about something. I think this might be an unpopular opinion, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. If your take on Hamas and the terrible terrorist attack that they did is as follows. Yes, that's despicable. There's no excusing it whatsoever. However, I also think that Israel has done terrible things, and we need to look at that. I don't think you're a horrible person for thinking that. I don't think that you're spreading Hamas's talking points. Even if I wouldn't agree with your conclusion, I think that's a fair statement. It is not defensible to support, defend, or excuse what Hamas did. Murdering civilians intentionally, kidnapping them, murdering children, parading women around after you killed them, nude or near nude, that's unforgivable. And there are a lot of people that are defending it, that are celebrating it. And we'll talk about those people. But there are people that have been critical of Israel, that are still critical of Israel, but say that this attack was heinous and not defensible. So I will not be telling those people, oh, you're spreading Hamas's talking points, you're a terrorist, blah, blah, blah. I will not be. However, anyone on the left, and there are a lot of them, who I've personally debated or had interactions with on X or Twitter, that said, when I was correctly pointing out that the policies of the United States and NATO helped exacerbate the situation with Russia, which the dominoes fell such that it ended up resulting in Russia invading. And I was quite clear that I don't support Russia or their invasion, but that I thought we could still be critical of the United States, the West, and NATO. How many times was I told, you're spreading Putin's talking points? Whether it be debating Dylan Burns, I'm really important, a litany of other people. That's what they told me over and over and over. Particularly, I'm really important to me, had a big hubbub about this. He said what I was saying was accurate, but it was still Putin's talking points. So if I hear any of those people saying, well, okay, what Hamas did was bad, but Israel does bad things, well, they're just spreading Hamas's talking points. Right? That's what they're doing. Now again, I don't think that's the case. I don't think that the average person who says, look, I don't like Israel, I don't like what their policies are in Gaza, but this attack was heinous and unforgivable. I don't think that's spreading Hamas's talking points. I don't think you should be viewed as suspect for that. But for those, and there are a lot of them, that wanted to make that same criticism, and see, this is what I mean, they can never see 2 feet in front of they're not interested in actually holding a standard. They believe that they're morally superior to us, and therefore they think that they should have one standard for them and their allies, and a completely different standard for the people that they disagree with. So I'll guarantee you, if I'm on a panel or do a debate with I'm Really Important, and he says something about Israel, and I say, that's spreading Hamas's talking points, he won't even get the irony. He won't even get the hypocrisy. He'll be like, that's ridiculous. How could you say that about me? Not even realizing, like, right. Which is exactly what your argument to me was about Ukraine, over and over and over and over again. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. Another thing that I put out. Let me not beat around the bush. There's going to be an awful lot of hypocrisy on all sides when it comes to what's going on with Israel. Because there's going to be there's basically only going to be 2 groups that are consistent. And I hope I'm one of them. There's going to be the group that's like, we should fund Ukraine and help them no matter what, and we should do the same with Israel. You're going to see an awful lot of neocons, right-wing, your Mike Pence types, your Mitt Romney types that are going to be in that boat. The nation builders. They're going to, doesn't matter, fund them. Then you're going to have people like me that says, regardless of what I think about the morality of what happened and the right or wrong, we should, as a country, stay out of it as much as possible. We should not be funding Israel. Israel can take care of their own business here. Same with Ukraine. Now, there are slight differences, which we could get into later. But that is my sincere belief. Do I think that Israel has a right to retaliate? Absolutely. They absolutely do. But I do not think that the United States should be involved. And there's someone who follows the channel that I talked with a while ago about sort of interventionism and operating on the global stage. His name's Average Debate Enjoyer. And the thrust of what I was saying to him was, even if there is an argument as to why the United States should sort of be the world police at times, how you need a hegemon, like the strongest kid on the block, to sort of make sure everyone's in line, the United States has lost their credibility and ability to do that. Because the people that have ran this country for the past 50 years have been so corrupt and lied to us and facilitated conflict in country after country after country, they can't do it anymore. Do you trust the same people that lied to us about Vietnam and Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya to tell the truth about Ukraine and Israel? Do you think they really care about the people there? Of course not. U.S. meddling's one of the reasons that the situation's as bad as it is. Now, that's not popular with a lot of right-wing people. A lot of right-wing people are going to say, no, we have to help Israel. I disagree. I'm going to stay consistent. Our country has enough problems. The government of this country should first and foremost be focused on solving the problems of the people of this country. That's what it should be doing. It should not be out causing intentional harm to other countries. And there should be a time where the United States could use its presence to hopefully broker a peace agreement, both between Ukraine and Russia and Israel and the Arab nations. And I think that time has long since passed with Ukraine and Russia. I don't think that time's right now for Israel. I think Israel needs to retaliate. And again, they have every right to retaliate. The other thing I say, I'm not here to lecture you. I'm not here to point fingers. I'm just going to tell you this. You will not find me celebrating deaths. I, too, in the very few amount of videos that I accidentally saw, first off, let's say this. You have to be careful, and I fall victim of this. I'm as guilty as everyone else. So many videos and images that you see on social media and even in the legacy media that you're being told is of this conflict right now in Hamas. Oftentimes what happens is through fog of war and people being shitty and things like that, they're showing you footage from other events. They could still be heinous videos that depicted something that really happened, but maybe it happened 3 years ago in Israel and Palestine, or maybe it happened in a different area of the world. So you have to be careful. Just like Russia and Ukraine, all sides are interested in propagandizing. So it's difficult to know exactly what's going on. Now, is it fair to say that some of those videos are accurate? Of course. Is it fair to say that Hamas did unforgivable things? Yes. And I am enraged in the ones that I've seen that I believe to be real, even if I can't prove that each individual one is real. And just like 9/11, I understand the people that are affected by this. And again, 9/11, I didn't know anyone personally that was in the towers that died. I knew people that went to war afterwards, some of which didn't come back. But it wasn't like I lost a family member in 9/11. But as an American, and as a teenager, I was 18, it affected me, 17 maybe. And my gut feeling was like, get them. No one messes with us that way. I have less of a connection to Israel, obviously. But I sympathize with people that do have a connection to that country, whether you lost a loved one there, or you're from there, whatever. I understand that rage. But I will not be one of those people saying, I hope they turn it into a parking lot. I won't be. I understand Israel will retaliate. And again, they have every right. I hope that they do so in a way that limits the damage to the guilty as much as possible. Or to the soldiers or terrorists as much as possible. But inevitably, innocent lives will die. And I think that's terrible. I don't know what to say. I'm just, you won't see me, rah, rah, yeah, get them. That's not what I'm about. So, just to throw it, the other thing is this. I understand that there is a lot of support for Hamas with Palestinians. But I assume the Palestinians probably, well, I do know this, most of them are in extreme poverty. They're probably not heavily literate in the sense of world affairs. In other words, they're probably getting their information filtered to them from like one or two sources, like their imam or, whoever. So it's difficult for them to break out of the paradigm. And they probably have reason to dislike Israel. But having said that, my government does a lot of really terrible things. A lot of really terrible things. Like Libya. Like Vietnam. If you're someone in Libya that went from, a country in Africa that was one of the better countries in Africa to now where there are open slave markets, and you saw your country torn to shreds, and then you see someone like Hillary Clinton saying, we came, we saw, he died. Wouldn't there be part of you that would be like, I hate the United States, and I hate the people there. And if we got the chance to make the United States a parking lot, that's what we should do. Now, I'm not saying that the actions of the United States of Hillary Clinton is tantamount to someone in Hamas brutally torturing an old woman or taking them slaves or something like that hostage. But I think about that. That's why I'm not so flippant to call for nuclear exchanges or the mass wiping of an area off a map. Having said that, I understand that Israel's going to retaliate. So why should the United States be pushing for peace right now in Ukraine with Russia, but not with Israel and Hamas? Well, one is the timing. The incident with Hamas just occurred. Not the best time. Kill a bunch of people, take hostages, and then the next day be like, okay, we're ready to sit down and have a conversation to broker a peace deal. It doesn't work that way. The other thing is this. The situations are sort of reversed from a power standpoint. Russia invading Ukraine, by any metric, was the weaker of those two countries. So it's only with mass support from the West that Ukraine is even able to mount a defense against Russia. As such, you could say it's not fair, it's ridiculous, etc. It is in the best interest of Ukraine to have a peaceful resolution as soon as possible. It's the opposite with Hamas and Israel. Israel has overwhelming conventional weapon and military superiority to Hamas. And so they are going to want to attack before any conversation, and it makes sense strategically for them, of having some sort of negotiation. And you could say that's hypocrisy, that's not fair. That's just the way of the world. That's the way it is. You want to negotiate from a position of strength. And Israel, they may not ever want to negotiate. They may want to go, we're going to wipe Hamas out, and if any Arab country has something to say about it, we'll go to war with them too. Hopefully that's not what happens, but that might be the position they take. But if there is a possibility for any sort of negotiation, Israel will only be willing to do that after they use an extreme amount of force. And Hand of Malice is right. They don't need us. That is absolutely the case. They don't need us. If you're sitting here right now and you're the biggest pro-Israel fan in the world, they don't need the United States aid. The United States has given them aid for a long, long time. Maybe if other nations would get involved, if Egypt or Qatar or Iran and other Lebanon and all of their armies militarized against Israel, then maybe you could say, okay, Israel's at a disadvantage. But not against Hamas. There was an awful lot of people, including people marching in real life, in the United States, in Europe, celebrating Hamas. Now, I already talked about this previously. It's one thing to say what Hamas did was horrific, it's indefensible. However, Israel has set up a situation where something like this was going to happen. And we need to, if we want a full, peaceful resolution, we need to acknowledge the wrongdoings on all sides. It's a fair criticism. I don't consider myself to be an expert on this conflict. I'm willing to hear that. But if you're out there celebrating Palestine and Hamas after this terror attack, that's not defensible. And it's not an insignificant amount of people. Basically, it's just cultural Marxism to its logical extent. The world is made up of oppressors and oppressed. And the oppressed are always morally justified in any action they take against the oppressor. So the language they're using is Israel are colonizers, and therefore the rape, the murder, the torture, the kidnapping of hostage, the murdering of children, all of it's justified. All of it. Because it's the oppressed fighting off the colonizers. What do you think they call the United States? Those same people? They're also colonizers. You think they wouldn't want the same thing done to you? How many people in this country right now, whether it be foreign nationals that came here illegally or legally through our porous southern border, or it be well-educated liberals who think that the United States is the great Satan and white people are evil or Christians are evil or MAGA people are evil or Republicans are evil and they're colonizers. How many of them are just waiting for their chance to support a movement that would treat you like Hamas treated Israel? They're out in the open. Thousands of them. We're in New York celebrating. But our FBI says the biggest threat to the country is Trump supporters. That's who they're targeting. That's who they're going after. Is Joe Biden to blame? Yeah. Or rather, his team. Joe Biden's no clue where he's at. He's got dementia. He just does what he's told. But not really. There is a direct link to the actions of Biden, as we'll talk about, to what happened on multiple fronts, or the Biden administration. However, let's be honest. The real culprit, as far as the United States goes, is our leadership for the past 50 to 70 years. We're sort of to blame. Because we've become complacent. And we have elected people over and over and over and over and over and over. Generations that don't give a shit about us. That have taken the strongest, wealthiest, most culturally significant country in the history of the world and have enriched themselves at the expense of this country and the people of this country. The United States that I grew up in the 90s, in the early 2000s, that was the clear hegemonic power, that was the wealthiest country in the world, the strongest country in the world, that could say, this is how it's going to be, and the rest of the world had to listen. It's not there anymore. We don't have the hard power. We don't have the soft power. The people running this country don't give a shit about this country and haven't. They give a shit about enriching their own power and those that help them obtain power. Most of them in the establishment are globalists that want an erosion of nation states, and they want people dependent on the government and not self-sufficient. And the only mistake that there are many mistakes that they've made, but one of the mistakes that they've made is assuming that they would be able to ascend to power unchallenged. That the whole world would be on board with this. But other nations, China, Russia, Iran, Qatar, BRICS nations, they have people in it that are fighting for their own personal reasons as well. They're not good people either that are running those countries. Will anyone be surprised if in the next 6 to 12 months China invades Taiwan? Would anyone be surprised? If you're a country around the world and you were afraid, you wanted to do something, but you were afraid that pressure from the UN or NATO or the United States would stymie you doing whatever your agenda was, now be the time to act. Has the United States and the West been weaker, both militaristically and diplomatically? Going back decades? No. We're stretched thin. We're running out of munitions because we sent so many to Ukraine. Now, our leaders are going to say, oh boy, now we got to send them to Israel. At a time where the economy in this country is in the pits. Now the area of the world, because we are no longer self-sufficient on fossil fuels, thanks to the Democrats, the left, and the Biden administration. Now the place we rely on the most for fossil fuels is going to be in a brutal war, which will make access to those fossil fuels much more difficult. But we've already depleted much of our strategic reserve because the Biden administration, in an effort to look like the economy wasn't that bad, dipped into our reserves. Because his policy of crushing domestic energy production has been a resounding success. Now, I'm aware that there is, quote, record numbers of oil being produced, but it's not being refined. And we could have produced much more and refined much more if Biden hadn't made it his stated mission to end the fossil fuel industry. It's like one of the first things I said about the Russia-Ukraine situation. Europe and the United States, but particularly Europe, relied on Russia for energy, yet at the same time wanted to sanction and bully Russia. But it's really hard to do when you're relying on them. Now, we could have been energy independent. We could have been working on this for 15 years. But the climate cult, the globalist climate cult, said you can't do that. Okay? Biden and Obama, which basically the Biden administration is just the third term of the Obama administration, because Biden's got dementia, so it's the Obama holdovers that are running things. They've given money to Iran over and over again. They've given money to Palestine and Hamas over and over again. Money that ended up going to Hezbollah and Hamas. They've excused terroristic behavior from those sort of countries because it's their belief that they're oppressed, and it goes in with their cultural Marxism. They've shown weakness to the world. Look at the devastating Afghanistan withdrawal, which I supported, pulling out of Afghanistan. But we left billions of dollars of weapons there. Now we see it looks like U.S. manufactured weapons in the hands of Hamas. Wonder how they got them. You mean it was a bad idea? To make the Taliban one of the most armed militaries in the world by leaving billions of dollars of equipment there? Who would have thought? Their excuses are laughable. Oh, well, the money, the $6 billion, that's still in an account. That's only for food aid. Right. Money's fungible. So the money they would have had to use for humanitarian and food aid, now they could use on weapons and then use the $6 billion. But that was their money. Okay. I just want to do a thought experiment for a moment. Obama put sanctions on Russia. Say that Trump comes in and immediately freezes up the assets of Russian oligarchs that Obama had froze. Gives them billions of dollars back. Then it turns out those Russian oligarchs financed terrorism to attack one of our allies. What do you think would have happened? Do you think that the left would have said, well, that wasn't our tax dollars. That was those oligarchs' money anyways. It was their money, so... And the media just carries water for them. Let's see some of the stuff I saw from you. Again, I didn't follow much today because I've been working. But some of the stuff I was seeing. Here's Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, one of the people that's really running the show. Here was him from last week, talking about how great they're doing in the Middle East. Good call there. Oh, shit, sorry. Forgot to unmute. Well, trust me, it was stupid. Yeah, we'll try again.
What we said is we want to depressurize, de-escalate, and ultimately integrate the Middle East region. The war in Yemen is in its 19th month of truce. For now, the Iranian attacks against U.S. forces have stopped. Our presence in Iraq is stable. I emphasize for now because all of that can change. And the Middle East region is quieter today than it has been in 2 decades. And what we said is we want...
That was last week. Good call, Jake Sullivan. You guys are doing a bang-up job. Here's the guy who's probably, reports are saying,
may have
is
known
actually running the show, Blinken. Let's see what he has to say.
What do you say about the argument that money is fungible? So Iran may have known this money is coming and used other funds to help fund this attack that happened.
Iran has unfortunately always used and focused its funds on supporting terrorism, on supporting groups like Hamas, and it's done that when there have been sanctions, it's done that when there haven't been sanctions, and it's always prioritized that. And again, I come back to the proposition that these funds have always been, under the law, available to Iran to use for humanitarian purposes.
What do you say?
Just like the internal reporting showed, just like John Kerry admitted during the Iran deal, yes, this money will eventually find its way to Hamas and Hezbollah. I argued back then how nonsensical it was. But it's their money. Legally, they're allowed to have it. We can't sanction it. Really? Then I assume you're not doing sanctions in any country, right? You would say the same about Russian oligarchs, that you've taken their money through sanctions. You'd say, well, we have to give it back. Legally, it's always been their money. Is that what they said about Zlochevsky? When the Ukrainian prosecutor before Shokin didn't help the UK and the UK had to unfreeze Zlochevsky's assets? Do you think all these people that you see now are saying, well, it was always his money. It was his money, so legally he was allowed to have it, even if he was going to do bad things? I mentioned this the other day, but I'll mention it here. I understand there are people that don't like Trump. That's fine. I've criticized Trump on many things. I understand that there are things personality-wise about him that many people would hate. And there are policy things that you might not agree with. And I understand that you might find Biden to be a lovable, doting old man. I don't. I despise him. But fine. Whatever. And I understand if you're a Democrat, you're going to have a bias towards Trump, Biden, and away from Trump. And I understand we could question how much exactly a president or an executive branch has to do with many of the things we see in the world or in the country. So we can have all of those debates. However, it is beyond dispute at this point, 3 years into Biden's term, that in almost every metric, the country is worse off today than it was under Trump. Economically, crisis at the border, foreign policy-wise. We are on the verge of a catastrophe. We are on the verge of an actual hot war with the United States. Thank you, Baird. I really appreciate it. We're on the verge of war. We're closer to World War III than we've been since the Cold War. And there are millions of people, millions, I'm not exaggerating, that will say that's not the case. That the country's better now than it was, say, pre-COVID Trump. How can you survive? How can we address problems for the country and the world going forward if we can't even agree on reality? Again, you could say, yeah, there's a lot of bad shit. You're absolutely right. But it's out of Biden's control. Hell, you could even try to say it's because Trump put us in a bad position. You could try to say that. I disagree, but fair enough. At least you're acknowledging the reality and then saying, here's my explanation for it. But if you refuse to acknowledge the reality, if you say, no, things are great, the economy's doing great, like Biden's out there saying, great economy, one of the strongest economies ever. Trump obviously blustering a little out there the past couple days, rightfully so. Whatever you think about Trump's foreign policy chops, his foreign policy, to the extent that there were no major wars that the United States got involved with, and no major wars to the tune that we see, like the Ukraine-Russia situation, the Israel-Palestine situation. Maybe he was lucky. Maybe he knew what he was doing. Whatever the case may be, he did great on that front. And yet, if you want to lefty X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, Trump was terrible. His foreign policy, he was the worst foreign policy president. You remember when I debated Dylan Burns before the 2020 election? And his big issue is foreign policy. One of the things we talked about was China, how Biden might be compromised on China. He said, no, Biden will be strong on China. I said, okay, we'll see. If Biden wins, we'll see if China becomes more aggressive or not. How'd that work out? Trump was terrible foreign policy. How's Biden doing? What's Biden's foreign policy achievement? can you deal with these people? Again, it'd be one thing if they were like, yeah, you're right, it's a mess. Way worse than it was under Trump. But we don't think it's Biden's fault. Okay, that's a debate. You can have an argument. You can have a disagreement. I mean, these are people like Pisco that think it was more likely Bowman pulled a fire alarm to open a door than to ring the alarm to cause a distraction and a delay. How do you deal with those people? You just have to laugh at them. But it's not funny in the grand scheme of things. There are millions of them. North Korea. You can see terror cells in the United States and Europe. I wouldn't be surprised to see them acting. Why wouldn't you right now? If you're them. Democratic Socialists of America are protesting for Palestine, thousands of them in New York City. An organization that I believe AOC, a couple other Congress people or state level people in New York are members of. How are they not out there condemning it? If a congressperson belonged to an organization that came out once Putin invaded and said, yay, we're protesting. Thousands of us are taking to the street to celebrate Putin's invasion. Don't you think our media would be all over those Congress people that were members of that organization saying, my God, are you going to condemn this? But no. Of course, Baird, all the fighting age people, again, we talked about it earlier. Thousands of people are saying, well, Israel had what coming to them because they're colonizers, so who cares if their women are tortured and kept hostage and murdered and kids are killed? And who cares? They're colonizers. We have no idea who these millions of people coming across the border illegally are. One of the arguments I always found hilarious on this front, there's plenty to say negative about illegal immigration anyways. But the idea of potential terrorists coming across, I always love this argument, right? You'll be talking to people about illegal immigration and they'll say something like this. Actually, 90% of people show up to their hearings. So the illegals that come and then they're released, 90% of them show up to their hearings. Okay, well let's say you're a member of Hamas, or ISIS, or Al-Qaeda, or Al-Nusra, or any other terrorist organization that wants to do harm to the people of the United States. Do you think you'd be in the 90% that shows up to your hearing? Or would you be in that 10% that's like, nah, I'm just going to disappear? Of course the shadiest people are going to be in the percentage that doesn't show up to the hearing. Zelensky's having a bad day. Oh, Bleezers, don't get me wrong. Here's the... Before I get to Zelensky. You have to understand when you're arguing with someone, oftentimes the best thing you could do is concede as many of their arguments for the sake of argument as possible and still be able to show how bad their argument is. For example, let's say that I wanted to argue against vaccine mandates. I could say vaccines are dangerous and cause a bunch of side effects and look at the VAERS database and things like that. To which they'll say, but VAERS is self-reporting and blah, blah, blah. Then we get in this big debate about that. Or I could say, fine, forget all that. We'll concede all that. Here is direct evidence that people that have natural immunity are actually more protected than the people that are vaccinated, and for that population, the side effects of the vaccine seems to outweigh any potential benefit. You might say, well, that's conceding the argument that vaccines are good in the first place and blah, 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 blah. Right. The same argument, but that shows that even if you're conceding those arguments, their argument is still bad. The same is true here. Right, I could say the data's wrong. They'll say, nuh-uh, the data's right. And then the debate becomes, here's a bunch of data that says 90%. And I'm like, well, actually, if you look at how this is calculated, well, here's CNN that says it. Here's the Cato Institute and blah, blah, blah. Then we get in this argument where we're just checking each other's sources and reading studies and things like that. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Hey, thank you, Ranger and Rogue. Thank you for the raid. I really appreciate it. There's nothing wrong with that. But what's easier is to say, okay, let's say you're right. 90% show up to the hearings. Do you think that if there were terrorists, they would be in the 90% that show up to the hearings? Or would they be in the 10% that don't? I'll give you another example, right? We were told with the BLM protest, 94% were peaceful. 94% of them. Now that number's probably bullshit. It probably is. It's very difficult. Because we don't have a legitimate legacy media. We don't have a legitimate press. It's up to random people. And someone like me is not going to be able to somehow correlate all the data from every BLM protest to find out which one had incidents of violence or not. But the point is, even if you accept their number, that 94% were peaceful, that leaves 6% that weren't. And that's just location. So a place like Portland that had riot after riot after riot, that only counts as one. Not the 70, 80 days of rioting they had. That still amounted to something like, on average, 4 locations per state of violence. So even if their number is accurate, which I don't believe, but even if it is, it still shows an overwhelming amount of violence that occurred with the George Floyd Black Lives Matter protest. I could spend all my time going, I don't believe that 94% number. But it's a weaker argument. Now, Zelensky. Zelensky has to be feeling pretty crappy right now. Because even he has to realize there's only so much to go around. And the neocon military-industrial complex people, they only need one conflict to siphon their money through to get rich. Zelensky's yesterday's news. Oh, I saw Zelensky saying Putin did it. Right. Desperation. Of course he's going to say that. He's got to stay relevant. Let me spoil the end of the Ukraine situation for you. I don't know if it'll be this year or 5 years down the road. But inevitably, Ukraine will be left like Afghanistan. A new thing will come, more COVID, climate change, sending money to Israel, some other country. Ukraine, bunch of places like BlackRock and Halliburton will get contracts to build up in Ukraine and things like that and siphon a bunch of money. Bunch of people in Ukraine will die. Most of their fighting age men will suffer. And then it'll be gone. And then the media won't be talking about Ukraine every day. And then Kevin McCarthy won't have a Ukrainian pin on. He'll have an Israeli pin on. And then you'll have people like Dylan Burns and a handful of other people going, my God, the situation there's terrible. Who could have thought that the United States would have left it like this? And you'll have people like me going, I told you. I told you that's exactly how it would go. Because you cheered for intervention from people, the leadership of the United States, that don't give a shit about the Ukrainian people. They don't care at all. They only care insofar as it allows them to achieve more power, to funnel money there, to win elections back home. As soon as it's no longer beneficial to them, they'll cut and run. And the people that will suffer the most will be the Ukrainian people. That's eventually how it ends. So all the people you see with Ukrainian flags in their bio that criticize people like me that said we should be trying to have a peaceful resolution, it's going to be the people of Ukraine that suffer the most. And they said, shut up. we talk to the people of Ukraine. They want to fight. Keep arming them to the bitter end. Fight them over there so we don't have to fight them over here. Okay. It's not me. Sure, our country suffers. It's the working class here that has to pay more and more in the forms of inflation and our own government not giving a shit about us. But we'll move on to the next thing and screw over the average people here. But the people that will suffer the most are the people of Ukraine. And Zelensky knows it. Now, he'll get rich in the meantime. He's a corrupt piece of shit. He'll get rich and him and his wife will have diamonds and houses and this, that, and the other. And he'll probably flee. Just like Karzai did in Afghanistan, the president of Afghanistan that we propped up, that fucking just fled Afghanistan to his mansion, who knows where in the world. That'll probably be Zelensky, or maybe not. Maybe Zelensky, unfortunately, will suffer a bad fate. But they know it. So, of course, Zelensky's going to be out there like, oh, don't forget me. Yeah, that's real bad what happened to Israel. Me. Putin must have did it. Putin did it. Keep arming us. Keep sending us money. And you know what the best part is? When inevitably it happens, and I'm 99% sure I'm right about how Ukraine will end. Again, I don't know when. Could be 20 years, like it was in Afghanistan. But when it does, the two responses will be people claiming it's a victory, that it was worth it, that we did good, like they tried with Afghanistan. And then you'll have people, and this will be Dylan Burns and a bunch of other people, what they'll say is that it's unforgivable that the United States left their allies. They just left them there. It's all those damn Republicans and right-wingers' fault. Because, just like when I debated that Kevin, whatever his name was, Castle, he said with Afghanistan, the problem was we should have stationed 500,000 troops there. So they'll always say, the problem is we didn't do it more. Let's see. Stephen L. Miller, I think, nailed the take, which was many of these people on the left and the media organizations were waiting to comment on Hamas's attack on Israel until Israel responds, because the story they want to tell is Israel's brutal, they're horrible the way they retaliated. If I had to guess what was occurring, and this is a complete guess on my point, I think that Hamas are just pawns. I don't think that they're a intelligent fighting force. I think that they are being instructed by Arab countries like the mullahs in Iran or Qatar. And I think that they're telling Hamas, you have a fighting chance. So Hamas believes, one, they could win, whether outright win militaristically, or they could win in that, like Ukraine could win in Russia. They could fight and cause enough damage that will cause the other side, hopefully, to leave. And I think the reasons they believe that are, one, because they're being told by countries with bigger weapons that they'll back them. And second, because they believe their religion tells them that their God will make them the victors. But they won't win. They don't have a chance. They don't. And I believe the mullahs in Iran and all of these, I think, all of the people that are either publicly, countries that are publicly or quietly cheering on Hamas, it's not just about Israel, it's about creating a coalition to challenge the traditional West. And so what they expect to happen is for Israel to fucking wipe Hamas off the map. That's what Iran expects. That's what Qatar expects. and then they'll say, see how evil Israel is? Do you see what the West has done? And try to galvanize a coalition then against Israel and against the West. Hamas doesn't. They think they have a chance to win. But I don't think the leaders in Iran and other places that plan this, I don't think they expect that. They want a PR victory. An excuse to create a coalition militaristically and economically to challenge. That's what I believe. Now, does that mean Israel's wrong to retaliate? No, I'm not saying that. But that's my belief of what's going on. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying, Guess Who Farted. The real people running the show, they're not in Gaza. If Gaza gets blown to smithereens tonight, it ain't gonna be them. And then that'll drive up not just support internationally in the form of a coalition, but it'll galvanize a lot of Muslims around the world. And it just so happens, a lot of people from the Middle East that support Palestine, vehemently support them, are now in the West. That's why you saw celebrations in New York, and in Dearborn, Michigan, and in London, and in Germany. If Israel wipes Gaza off the map, there's going to be an awful lot of people in all of those Western countries that are real pissed. Yeah, Canada. Yeah, Turkey. Isn't Turkey our NATO ally? And they're sending aid to Gaza? To Hamas? We station nuclear weapons in Turkey. And they're on Hamas' side? Thanks, Biden. Doing a bang-up job. I mentioned this the other day. Can someone tell me why we don't have an immediate FISA warrant to spy on the entire Biden administration? After all, that's the precedent that was set. Now, with the FISA warrant, what you're doing is you're treating an American as a hostile foreign spy. As such, you're allowed to spy on all of their communications, everyone they talk to, and everyone those people talk to. So, for example, in the Trump team, by spying on Carter Page, they were able to spy on Carter Page and everyone Carter Page talked to, and everyone those people talked to. So let's say Carter Page talked to Paul Manafort, and Paul Manafort talked to Donald Trump. They were able to spy on Carter Page, Paul Manafort, and Donald Trump, both during his campaign and his presidency. Now, the justification for that was Russia's really bad, and they supposedly hacked DNC's server, and a suspected Russian spy that was working with Hillary's team said that Carter Page was a Russian asset. It was all bullshit, but that was reason enough to get a FISA warrant to spy. Now, I don't want illegal FISA applications against people I dislike, but would it be illegal? Let's see what we know. We know for a fact that a guy named Robert Malley, oops, sorry, wrong button. Let me see here. Here's a Twitter feed. Robert Malley was the U.S. envoy to Iran, appointed by Biden after having been the lead negotiator under Obama of the Iran deal. He has been suspended without pay, and the FBI now has an open investigation of mishandling classified info. Since he only dealt with Iran, it's not hard to guess which country was involved. He was hired by Biden. Ariane Tabatai, whatever, Chief of Staff to the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Ops Christopher Mayer, is a longtime member of the Iran Experts Initiative, which is a front group consisting of academics and others who assist the U.S. government in dealing with Iran. Email comms between her and various officials in the Iran government show that she has been taking directions from Tehran and reporting on matters learned in her capacity of Department of Defense. Mayer's responsibilities on the DoD's website are described as all special operations, irregular warfare, counterterrorism, and information operation policy issues, and the oversight of special operations, peculiar administrative matters on behalf of the Secretary. These are huge stories. A key feature of the Malley hiring is the fact that he has known Secretary of State Blinken since high school. The Biden administration is compromised by foreign spies. Given that, so one, we know that there are connections to Iran and serious questions about several members of the Biden team and their connections with Iran. And we know that Iran financed a terror attack against allegedly our ally Israel. And here's what's different. With the Trump, even if you said, well, we know that Russia hacked, so we know Russia did something bad. Okay. We know Iran did something bad. They funded a terror attack on Israel. So they both did something bad, Russia and Iran, right? And there are shady connections between Russia and Trump's team in the form of Carter Page. Turned out to be bullshit, but that was the excuse. Well, we know there are shady connections between Iran and at least two members of the Biden team. The third thing, did Trump ever do anything to benefit Russia? No, not really. He said nice things about them, but he proceeded to sanction them. He proceeded to provide weapons to Ukraine to deal with them. He proceeded to increase domestic oil production to hamper Russia. Did Biden do anything to benefit Iran? Yes, he did, didn't he? So if there was enough reason to spy on Trump and his team through a FISA warrant, clearly now we've crossed that threshold. Right? They should get a FISA warrant on O'Malley and that other lady, and then spy on everyone that they talk to and the people they talk to. And also they should leak it to the press, right? That's what they did with Trump. And we need to start a huge, massive investigation. Right? Not my precedent. Oh, I agree, guys who farted. Not just with Biden, but everyone on the team that he communicated with. Right. That's the purpose after all, right? Yeah, I know, cool vibing gamer. You know, I think Counterpoints has been great on this. The left, they're going mask off. So many, and listen. Yes, I understand that Twitch politics and YouTube politics is a small sliver of who the left is or who Democrats are. I get it. But such a disproportionate number of them are so unhinged. The Pentagon put out a statement on that Ariane lady saying no comment about why she has a security clearance, but we fully support her. Right. Well, then time for a FISA warrant, right? Doing good, Ninja. Not that it would matter, because the FBI is more interested in taking down Trump. They think Trump supporters are the biggest threat to the country. So they don't give a shit if people in Biden's team are working with Iran or China. Alright, I think I'm going to find someone to raid. I got a lot of paperwork to do, unfortunately. But I was happy I was able to come on and stream some tonight.
Casual and a definite.
I love when I get messages on Twitch from people I don't recognize, and they say things like, Cope Harder Cupcake. Who are you? I don't know. We'll raid EOD. I should be on tomorrow night. Hopefully I'll have more to say. But it's going to be a hectic couple weeks for me here at work. So, but check out my TikTok channel. I've been putting videos up there. I'll get those over on YouTube as well as YouTube Shorts. And also you can find me on X, on Twitter there. So check those out if you want to see me doing more stuff. Why is what automatic? Very rarely do I ban someone, or thank you so much, Archmage. I really appreciate it. Very rarely do I ban people, mod things. I don't know how the hell most of it works, so... Yeah, I didn't have anything to do with it. Cool game. Any debates planned for the future? Not that I know of. You know, I got an offer from Andrew Wilson to fly to Dallas and debate in real life, but my God, I'm so busy and I don't have money for a plane ticket or anything like that. And maybe I could justify doing it if it was a really big name, but they didn't really have anyone. So I got to get hold of Andrew and tell him I probably can't do that. But other than that, I'll try to line some stuff up. I'd like to have... I want to get in touch with Casimir. Here's what I would like to do. I know Casimir has strong thoughts on sort of Israel-Palestine, sort of in favor of Israel, and I would like to talk to him. Then I would like to talk to someone who's more in favor of Palestine, and then maybe moderate a debate between the two of them. I think that would be interesting, because I admit I'm very ill-informed on the situation. Aftershock neighbor guy, I'm sorry, I'm just heading out. I got a bunch of paperwork I gotta do. So we're going to raid EOD. But I do appreciate you all showing up. So I should be on tomorrow around 8 o'clock. I look forward to seeing you all there. Check out my TikTok, my YouTube, my Twitter. I'm going to have stuff being uploaded there almost daily. I appreciate all of you. I really do. Sorry I couldn't stay around longer. Stay safe out there. Remember, no matter how bad things get, you know if you're a good person. Your family, your relationship with God if you're religious, your image of yourself, you know if you're doing the right thing. So stay happy out there. There's always reason to be happy, so don't get too depressed about this stuff. All right, thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate all of you, and as always, have a good one.
And Hamas hides behind civilians all the time. They're known for that. Just mean not everyone in Gaza is part of Hamas. Yeah, that's true. That's fair.